Welcome to Season 9, Episode 50 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today I am pleased to interview Michele Parad, who joins us from Palm Beach, Florida. She's a conscious entrepreneur and marketing expert. Tune in as she shares with us her novel methodologies designed to help those who are self-aware become self-actualized and fully aligned with the source energy of the universe. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
Michele Parad is an author, speaker, and intuitive guide for conscious leaders. She is known for Your Brilliance Archetype Guides and the SELL, the SELL method, a spiritual philosophy that helps empower her clients to build successful businesses that align with their path towards self-actualization. She is a co-author of the international bestseller, Success with Source. Her flagship program, Sell Your Brilliance, takes individuals through higher conscious marketing strategies and activation processes to confidently launch their heart-centered businesses. Michele, welcome to the Be Conscious podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the intro. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Michele, it is a sincere delight to have you. I think as a conscious entrepreneur myself, I feel like the sore spot for me is marketing. I've never really liked it. And I feel that there's so much ick feeling around marketing, and particularly when you are in the realm of spirituality. I think maybe that holds many of us back. I would say that is something that has held me back. So I'm very interested to know about your business. But I first want the audience, and I would love to learn about you. Can you take us back a little bit and help us to understand who you are, like how you grew up and how you came into marketing in the beginning, before it was conscious marketing?
Such a good question. Thank you. So, I grew up in a kind of multinational upbringing. My parents are from Ukraine. They immigrated to the US in 1980. They were basically what's called refuseniks. So they were kind of like refugees essentially, and they had to pretty much leave everything behind and come to the US and start anew. And so they were really instrumental in showing me what's really possible when you work hard and are resourceful and find ways to survive and eventually to thrive. And so since then, we moved to many different countries. So I got to move around every 3-4 years into a different space. My dad is an entrepreneur and a kind of an angel investor as well, and I got to go with him and get to meet so many different people and different cultures around the world. So was very blessed in that way to get a feel and understanding of the diversity really that exists. And after that, I had a very, I'd say, left brain kind of career, and really thought, I would follow the steps that everyone told us to follow. Got, all the academic accolades that I thought would help me in my life, and studied very hard, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. But when I went into the professional world, I found myself pretty lost because I felt that there wasn't really a system to help people really understand themselves, who they are, what their skill sets are, um, what they love to do. And we're really just kind of, in a way, positioned by accident or not by accident, as you may think, into companies and organizations that maybe we have a connection to, or somebody in our school told us, is a good place to apply to. And we really kind of blindfoldedly go into careers without really thinking deeply about it. That's what I experienced, and that's how I felt my peers also were going into the professional world. And so when I found myself sort of at a bank, that was my very first job, and it was also during the financial crisis. It was very interesting to be kind of in an environment that was not very suited to me and to my personality, even though I was able to somehow navigate it as best as I could. Um, and then, that really started me on the path, honestly, of, 'cause I think it's one of those things when you're in the wrong place, you're like, okay, now how do I understand what the right place is for me?
Mm-hmm.
So that really started my journey of moving from organization to organization, trying to find my home essentially. And I think deep down, I always wanted to do something meaningful. That sort of came with me, I think, innately. And so I started out looking at organizations that were doing good, and I fell into, in a way, working in clean tech, helping to foster connections between investors and startup organizations, and subsequently other organizations that were, yeah, helping to facilitate, anything that was greener consulting, or in the realm of sustainability, which I really enjoyed this kind of industry because it felt good, and everyone who was in it was really wanting to make a difference for sure.
Right, right.
Um, but even so, I found myself not, and that's why I bounced around so much. And I was working in different, business and marketing roles at the different organizations I was at. But I just was constantly trying to find a place that I could really shine my light. And it
Mm-hmm.
was it
Mm-hmm.
was difficult to do in the places I was working at. Um, in part, I felt some of them were very male dominant, and I felt a little bit misplaced. um, and also in part just due to the hierarchical system that we're in and the competitive system that we're in, where everyone is sort of um, trying to uplevel themselves sometimes at the expense of others. And so unfortunately, I found myself in situations where people didn't want me um, to showcase my intelligence or my ideas, because that was a threat to them, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt very stifled, unfortunately. And so that got me into a deep state of of depression, I would say, and that was right around the time of what you want to call my Saturn return. So right around, year 29. This tends to happen for many people, but that was really when I started to go into a place of what's the purpose of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I started on my spiritual path. So I was seeking out something. I went to an astrologer who basically ended up telling me I would be a healer, educator, and facilitator. And at that time, I had no idea what a healer was because I was so not in that realm. And now I can laugh because all of those things came true.
Well, Michelle, before we go into the spiritual stuff, I'd like to backtrack a little bit just to ask you a little bit about some of the things that you brought up. Because when you're as you're speaking, you're reminding me of myself in a lot of
Mm,
ways, and I'm sure a lot of people that might listen to this podcast. And it's interesting because I did a talk in New York City called The Journey Back to You, which talks about going from job to job, city to city, place to place, relationship to relationship, trying to figure out yourself, like trying to find your place. But before we go into that kind of spiritual journey, can I ask how old were you when your parents moved here, or were you born in this country?
yeah, I was born in Chicago, and I was only there my first 5 years, and then we moved to Paris. And from there, yeah, again, every couple of years out. So I was in Paris, Prague, Zurich, London. I mean, all fabulous places to be. Um, and then I came back to the US for university. And then I went back to London actually for my late 20s to work, to do a master's. And then I worked there as well. And then kind of came back to the US and still have been moving pretty much ever since. I've been a pretty nomadic person, um, but it suits me. It serves me, and yeah, I feel like I've also had like nine lives, because each place that you go to, there's a different set of people. There's a different part of yourself that comes out as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of growth that happens with moving.
Oh, I get it. I understand completely. I feel like sometimes when people are globetrotters or world travelers, I think perhaps on a very deep spiritual level, they're also soul travelers. Like maybe they've also moved around the cosmos a bit before and after each incarnation, but that's a whole different level of thinking.
That's a cool theory. Yes, that's probably lovely.
Yeah, I think there's a pool, like there's something in your spirit that keeps you like wanting to experience new things, or you feel like restless in a way. There
Mm.
there was this movie that was starring, I think, Juliette Binoche and Johnny Depp, I think, called Chocolat, and it was about this woman who,
Mhm.
I guess in vernacular terms, we'd say she had a gypsy spirit, where like she would just feel the wind and she'd pack up and
Mhm.
go. And she spent her whole life like moving and
Mm.
moving and moving. Really, when something didn't feel right, it was like her indication. That's when the wind shifted, or something, and she would pack up and go. And then there's a point where she was
Mhm.
packing up her child with her. I think her child's name in the show was Anuk. And the child just at one point in the middle of the night said, I'm not
Mhm.
going. And it really had her introspect, like what was driving the bus? Like what keeps her on the
Mm.
go? And I remember that film impacting me very deeply because I felt in many
Mm.
ways like someone that, always was seeking something. And I realized that my journey, and perhaps the journey of this character in the movie, was an alchemist journey. And I
Mhm.
keep coming back to this idea it was the journey back to yourself. Well, you talked a little bit about your dad being an entrepreneur and an angel investor, and
Yeah.
perhaps what
Mhm.
was the catalyst in your early life of moving your family around. Um, Siblings, mother, like what were roles of those individuals in your family if you have siblings?
Mm. My sister is 9 years older, so we had quite a generational difference. So when I was 9, obviously she left,
Mhm.
and we kind of have separate lives, really, even though now we connected a little bit more, living in the same city. But because previously we were always in different places. But yeah, so she was from a slightly different, generation. And then my mom, she was in the US. She was a school principal, but when she moved to Europe, they basically had a law at that time. I don't think it exists now, but that expats cannot have like two people working. So she basically gave up her career
Mhm. Mhm.
at that time, and was basically really just focused on me and my sister. And she was like really involved in the school in other ways, like being on the board and things like that. And yeah, pretty much supporting my dad through the journey as well.
Can I ask you about you? Like when you were traveling and going from place to place, and I know the physical places sound very interesting and culturally very rich, but how did you navigate relationships moving like that? Or would you consider
Mhm.
yourself more of an introvert or introspective person, or how does that work?
Sure. I feel that I made some very I am a more of an introverted person, but I made some really beautiful friendships in every place that I lived in, which was very sad for me to then leave, because even though you want to keep in touch, it's very difficult if you're not in the same place. Um, so I have an imprint in every in every place that I've lived, but that is the sad part. I think about moving, as exciting as it is, you do have to leave people behind, um,
Right.
and it's it's also part of our evolution too. So that's part of that lifestyle that you kind of have to come to terms with as well. And I always keep those people, they're still in my heart for sure.
Yeah, it seems like, Michelle, if I could say, moving like that, country to country, place to place, especially when you're are quite young. I even think if you're older, I don't know if there's an age limit on this, but I imagine that there must be feelings of grief, like of loss, like repeatedly, maybe loss of place, loss of person, relationship, connection, whatever. Maybe material things, like you can't always maybe bring everything with you. And
Mhm.
so I wonder what your thoughts on are about that. I remember doing a podcast on the grieving. Like it was during the pandemic. I called it like the year of grieving because there was so much loss of life, loss of maybe
Mhm.
titles and identities, jobs, whatever it was,
Mhm.
connections. And I felt like as a nation, maybe as a global community, that we were grieving and in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
I feel like, I would say that I'm in a grieving, like a functional grieving state where I'm feeling loss of things. And so I just wondered, I wonder
Mhm.
what you think about that, or how did you ever have such feelings?
Yeah, no, of course, but you have to look at it from this perspective of, I mean, if there's something that you're grieving about, that means that you've
Yeah,
lived a good life, right? If there's something that you've lost, that means that there was something worth
that you loved.
it was valuable, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put that. I guess there's that old adage, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. or in this case, experienced at all?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I really I'm really grateful that you shared a little bit about your personal life and your growing up. How many languages do you speak?
I speak Russian and French, and I did learn a little bit of German, although I'm a little bit rusty with it, but I can understand it as well. Um, and yeah, all very beautiful languages. And I think different personalities um, come across within the different languages too. Like, the sound that comes through with a different language is different, like the intonation and the pitch as well.
Yeah.
So I feel that there's like a different side of me that comes through in the different languages as well, which is always fun.
And English, of course, right?
Yes, well, that's a given. Yes.
Well, I'm wondering if we could talk about your career journey because there's this feeling that the
Mhm.
way we do one thing is the way we do all things. So the idea surrounding that is if you're moving around a lot in your personal life or your family life, then you're also doing that in your work life. And it may be for different reasons or it may be unclear, but
Mhm.
to me, it's like a vibration, like it's an energy. And so when you were speaking about work positions and
Mhm.
feeling that lost feeling, and you said, I think I loved what you said about how sometimes we blindly go into positions. It's kind of
Mhm.
like checking boxes or what society tells us what we should do. But I've come to understand in the spiritual sense that when we make any transaction, it could be a financial transaction, it could be a relationship type of thing, or job,
Mhm.
type of thing, or even, community, when we're going to a community, we need to check our vibration. It's like, so how do we feel about it? So on paper, things may look right, but there's a misalignment or a malalignment with how you're feeling inside about it.
Mhm.
And I think many people ignore that. Like they're like they push through it because it's the right thing on paper or
Mhm.
it's the expected thing or what everybody else is doing.
Mhm.
But inside they feel horrible. And I've had that experience. When I was going into medical school and clinical medicine, I remember like stuffing down that feeling that something didn't
Right.
feel right
Yes.
because it seemed like a quite right, honorable thing to do to go into medical school and become a
Mhm.
doctor, become a surgeon is what society, supported and it seemed right. Like I could do it. Like I had the capacity and the ability and the aptitude to do it. And a wise person has told me that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Mhm.
And as a young person, it took me a while to fully embrace it. Like I could hear it and I could understand it. But when the rubber met the road, I was always doing what I thought I should do, or even what I had to do, what I believed I had to do,
Sure.
more than what set well with my own soul. And I think
Mhm.
you said this in your one of your PDF articles that you sent over.
Mhm.
You talked about being in the financial world,
Mhm.
and I had a stint in that. I was working in healthcare equities,
Right.
and I remember thinking again. I felt that in like malalignment, searching for meaning, not doing my spiritual work, which I do now, and having this big question about, well, if I do this, like if I do what makes my heart sing, if I do, you talk about being
Mhm.
aligned with source. If I do that work, how do I make money? And I think you mentioned that your colleagues asked you the same thing.
Mhm.
And so many of us, when we embark on this spiritual journey, and maybe I just speak for myself, but I believe that many of us that embark on spiritual journeys, we don't have the financial backing. And it adds a layer of, oh God, struggle, confusion, um, consternation, like
Mhm.
questioning, because you're like, well, geez,
Mhm.
I'm doing it. Like I'm being actualized. I'm doing what has meaning for me. Yet I don't feel financially supported. And so I'd love to hear your experience and thoughts surrounding that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, well, what you were saying in terms of alignment, I do think that we make a lot of choices when we're not on a spiritual path. We make a lot of choices that are there to keep us safe, and we have a part of our brain that is still operating from that perspective, and subconsciously too. It's not going to allow you to do that thing that is maybe going to hurt you. Maybe you've had a traumatic experience in the past around doing something like that, like putting yourself out there, being visible. That last time you did it, you made a presentation and were rejected, for example, right? So your body and your mind is constantly finding ways to keep you safe and to keep you accepted as well, right? Which is why we have chosen paths, a lot of us that are not really exactly what we're super passionate about, but we think it's other people are going to praise us for, or other people are going to admire us for, and so that's where there's a bit of a slippery slope. And sometimes we have to make those decisions to then realize what we've done, and hopefully come back to ourselves. But not everyone has that opportunity, maybe in this lifetime.
Or takes the opportunity, right? I think because it's a risk. It's a risk against
Right.
the institutions that we've created, against the constructs we've created. You talk about a chosen path. And I think we embark upon our chosen paths until we can no longer stand it, if I'm honest, Michelle.
Right. Exactly.
And some of us then have a catalyst, if you will, to get on our rightful path.
Hmm.
And I think I had that. And, you have to overcome a lot of fear to come out of the constructs, whether it's the money construct or the gender construct or the
Hmm.
roles, that all the constructs, the religious constructs, the time construct, all the systems that we've put in place,
Yes.
to come out of that, to come into yourself. Again, it's just to me that journey back to self. I want to talk about what your,
Yes.
you said something earlier about, I think you called it the Saturn return.
Hmm.
I want to hear a little bit about what that means to you, and what was it that kind of kicked you in gear, if you will, to do your conscious work. Now, before you answer that, I want to take a little bit of a break, okay?
Okay.
Hang on.
Like what you're hearing so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. How would you describe your relationship with money? Did you ever imagine that your deepest feelings and beliefs about money could be preventing you from acquiring all the wealth that you desire? Click the link below in the show notes to learn more about Dr. Nicholas's highly sought-after Frequency of Money program to positively transform your relationship with money. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
Before the break, Michelle, we talked about the catalyst that put you on the path of your conscious works. Can you talk to us about that? I don't know, was it a dark night of the soul? You talked about this Saturn return. Is there something surrounding that kind of a maybe astrological or cosmic type of
Hmm.
shift that occurred in you that took you from what you were doing in, I would say, the mainstream or corporate America or banking, the traditional business, into what you are doing now?
Yes. So it was certainly an astrological time period, and it was a time when I was also reflecting. In some ways, I had some instances where I realized how powerful my mind was in sabotaging me.
Mhm.
And on the flip side of that is if my mind can sabotage me, then my mind can also do the opposite too. And so, just to give you an example, I was basically given this opportunity at work to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos and put on an event which was attended by some very high profile people. And at that time, I felt like I wasn't deserving to be in that room. I felt
Mm.
um, like, who am I to be here?
Mhm.
And so I sabotaged myself in that incident. And the night before the event, I had a knee accident, which, subsequently I had to go get surgery done there, which meant I couldn't attend that event. And that was just a small example to show me, like, wow, I really created this whole scenario to get myself out of this event.
Right, right.
On some on some conscious level, I'm like, yeah, of course I'd want to be there. But on a subconscious level, we're not even sometimes aware that we've got these fears going on in the background. And so that was one incident that got me to explore, like, well, if I somehow created this, then I'm creating other things in my reality too, right? And
Or you're creating
well,
everything.
yes.
You're the creator of your own
But
life.
at the time, I didn't have those concepts were all new to me. I was just experiencing uh, it
Mhm.
in live. So so anyway, some of my family friends kept telling me about Kabbalah, and so that word seemed to have come up a lot. And I wasn't very religious growing up, so I was pretty secular. My family is Jewish, but anytime I did go to a religious type of place, I felt like everyone was just in motion, like they were just going through the motions of reading. They were just sort of listening to whatever the rabbi priest had to say, and for me, it didn't feel like there was a pure connection with it, and or the mass of people were not really connecting with it. So I never felt very affiliated with traditional religion, but with Kabbalah, I got very curious about it because it was more um, it was philosophical. It was really making you think, and yeah, getting you into the depths of, like, what's the meaning of the relationships that are coming into my life, and how can I be a better receiver of abundance in my life. And so that really spoke to me, and I ended up going kind of from zero to straight into a mystery school. So they were talking about all kinds of things that I thought they were pretty insane at the time because it was so new to me. But there was something that caught my curiosity nonetheless, and I still, stayed and did a program there for about 10 months. And at the end of that program, I had a real visceral experience of, creator source energy, whereas before it was all just, theory at the end of the day.
Can you describe that experience? What does that mean, a creator source experience?
Yeah, for me, it felt like it was an elevated. Uh, it's hard to explain, of course, but I felt as though I was an elevated human, and everything around me, like the trees were crisper, like everything was more in focus.
Mm.
It's as if like you're now kind of like in the Garden of Eden and everything is perfection. Like
Mhm.
that was kind of that's the kind of feeling that came through. And it's um yeah, it's a sensation more than anything else.
Was it a lasting type of sensation, or was it something that happened once or at a certain event?
Yeah, well, that was like a specific moment,
Mhm.
and we were doing a lot of energetic rituals to basically get us to that stage. Um, and of course, I think all of us go in and out of that state, right? There are times where I can be really disconnected and then I don't feel that presence around me. And
Yeah.
then there's other times when go on an amazing retreat and like suddenly I'm back in that state. Um, so, we can go in and out of those, but over time, I do feel that I have more of these like higher states. And I think that those higher states are a representation of being closer to the state of source energy, essentially.
Mm.
So the more of this energy, spiritual work, subconscious work that you do, the closer you are to being like God, the closer you are to being self actualized, right? And you mentioned that word too before. And so there are still negative states and challenges throughout the journey, but there are more states of joy, and
Mhm.
more states of um, peace and fulfillment. Yeah, so like those higher frequencies, more of those things come in for you.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know if you've read, it was a posthumous book by Dr. David Hawkins called The Map of Consciousness.
Yes, yes.
And in his work, he measured the muscle kind of vibrations. I believe it's kinesiology is the study of this,
Hmm.
of measuring the vibration in your body
Yeah.
related to different emotional states, whether that it's shame, guilt, anger, fear, or the higher levels of experiences like love, joy, bliss, and even enlightenment, whatever one thinks that is, that state of being is. And the idea, I believe, what I took from this was that as humans, as embodied beings, we have the capacity to feel everything, all of it, every range, every vibration. But the question is, where do you live? Like, what's your set point, if you will? Like, when you're not in love and not enlightened, where do you settle back to? When you're not in immediate fear or danger, if you will, where do you set back to? And according to Dr. Hawkins, 85% of humanity rests at this place just below the frequency of courage, which measures about 200 on this logarithmic scale of vibrational frequencies. And so most of us, like
Mhm.
people around the world, human beings, we're living in fear. Like we're just,
Right.
on a logarithmic scale from 20, which is shame, to 800 to 1,000, which is enlightenment, most of us are below 200. So we're on this, like, if you think about Buddhist or other types of ideologies, we're in these lower energies. And so
Exactly.
when you speak about having experiences of being more connected, to me, those are the higher vibrational frequencies. And that as you do more of your spiritual work,
Mhm.
as you do more of your introspective work, as you seek to be actualized and be a fully formed human, you have more of those higher vibrational experiences of joy, love, and bliss, where things look
Mhm.
and appear more brighter, crisp, as you said. I love how you say that, like more vibrant, where you see beauty more than you see despair and pain, even though it all exists, it's all happening, it's all around. But your focus is at that place of, even if it's to me in a place of like acceptance. um, I like to call it being the observer, like where you observe all of it, but you don't allow your frequency, your vibration to dwell in those lower energies as a default, as your default condition.
Yeah.
And so I would say before my spiritual awakening, my default condition was sadness. Like wherever, whatever highs or experiences or accomplishments, I would settle back into a place of sadness. And I didn't know
Mhm.
why. I had that vibe, that frequency for so long. I didn't know what it was to be without it. I always felt that way. And so I just thought it was normal. And when people didn't have that set frequency down in those lower levels, I thought that they were like lying. I was like, how can anybody really be happy? Like at baseline, yeah, you can have happy moments,
Mm.
but people that, were just kind of bubbly and
Yeah.
happy, I felt like I did not trust them because I didn't know how one
Yeah.
rests at that frequency.
That's so, so interesting. Yeah, I have to say that along my journey, I was probably the same too. I had probably an underlying undercurrent of sadness as well, just from birth, right? Like just from our traumatic experiences. And I tended to also um, bring into my field other friends that were also sad. And because like attracts like, right? And then, this you and the other sad person together kind of commiserate together, and you're kind of perpetuating your whole state as it is, and until you get to a point where you are changing your own state, and sometimes you kind of have to let go of those people too.
Right. Like the angry people or the sad people
Yeah.
or the complainers or the Debbie Downers. Yeah, you got to let them go.
Unless they also, change as well, or,
Mhm.
and so you can welcome them too if they're on their own path. But um, yeah, sometimes the sad part is that in changing your own state, you've got to leave others behind because you realize that the way you connected with them was through your sadness,
Yeah, yeah.
or through a different state. And so that's again part of the realization and the journey that you have to take as you're climbing up whatever this mountain is. I don't know if there's like a final destination, but I wanted to circle back to your question about the financial piece, because I know that that's a really important one,
Yes.
for anyone who is on this path of self-realization. For me, that didn't come instantly, and I think I was really naive to think that, oh, now that I am on my purposeful path, like everything is going to be laid out for me.
I had
You
the
know?
very same thought. I said, "Okay, I'm doing it. I'm brave.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to do my conscious work." And then somehow I would be miraculously rewarded and everything would
exactly.
fall into place. Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing has been farther from the truth, and I'm sure you will agree with that.
Yeah, so that was kind of a belief system that,
Mhm.
the reality of things kind of brought me back to, okay, well, then what is it that is going to bring in success? And that is really what took me on this journey too, of continuing to reshape and reformulize what I'm bringing out in the world, because you've got to. There's this interesting. I want to. It's like a puzzle. It's a puzzle essentially, and you've got to get all the pieces together to complete the whole picture. And sometimes we don't have all the pieces when we start our business.
Mhm.
That's one of the problems. The other problem is we aren't operating from those higher frequencies as well. So we are confronted with a lot of work that we have to do on ourselves that we didn't think we needed to, but it's part of it. Is to in order to become that diamond, right? There are things that we still have to excavate about ourselves to become that person that can hold the business that we're trying to create.
Yeah, it's like this downward pressure, like you talked about the diamond.
Hmm.
Like there's a pressure to create that. Analogy I like to use with people is the diving board, like the springboard, that it requires a downward depression or a downward energy to spring you forward.
Hmm.
And many of us have this stuff in us. We talked about the sadness or people self-sabotaging or people, whatever they're carrying with them. Um, that that stuff is what you have to address to move you forward.
Right.
And I think we believe, I think it's a collective belief system. I don't think you and I are the only ones that shared it, is that when you're quote unquote doing the right thing, then that's enough. And you kind of get a pass
Mhm.
from all your stuff.
Right.
But nothing's further from the truth. And the reason I say that is because when you begin this journey of introspection, this journey of self actualization, you are shown yourself.
Right.
All those shadow aspects, all those parts of you that you don't like about yourself, or that you've carried perhaps from the ancestral planes,
Hmm.
generationally, the patterns, the cycles, the energies. We believe that we can have great grandma's hair or personality, even, or talents of someone from our past. And I always ask if that's true, if we see the physicalness, the phenotypic expression of our ancestors, could we not also carry the energy of past generations?
Right.
Whatever those unresolved fears were, or unresolved feelings, whatever that is, that the intangibleness about us, if we
Mm.
can carry a personality trait or a sound of a voice, could we not carry the energy of past generations too?
Right.
And I believe when you are the person in your lineage that stands up, I would say, and faces that universal aspect of self that does the work, then you are clearing energies and transforming frequencies from generations backwards and forwards.
Yes.
There are things that you are probably experiencing that you cannot put your finger on in this lifetime. And then you are, I guess, brave enough um, to stand in the light, to transform it.
Yes.
And those heavy, dense feelings from your personal past, from your family generational past, from your ancestral past, do not feel good. They do not feel good.
Of course not.
But and that's why everybody avoids it. I suspect that's why we are incarnate anyway, is to finally deal with the crap that we've been putting off lifetime after lifetime. And so finally, when you do it, you're just like, oh my God, it's like drinking out of a fire hose but it's energy. It's you. You know what I believe it is, Michelle? You are allowing yourself to actually feel it.
Mm.
You're not numbing yourself. You're not denying it. You're not intoxicating yourself. You're not avoiding it. You're allowing yourself to feel and feel all of it from that lowest vibration to the highest vibration.
Mm.
And the gift, I believe, is that you get to feel finally the higher vibrations. And then at some point on your journey, your set point elevates where you're not in fear all the time, but you're in a higher place of, like, your set point resets where you can become, I say, quiet and still inside. You can become the observer of things that would spiral you out no longer do that, but you observe that it exists And then you recognize that you have a choice on how you react to it. And so I think this is what this journey is about. But very few of us are brave enough to embark upon it.
Mhm.
We're still vibrating below the frequency of courage, which is 200 on that logarithmic scale of the map of consciousness.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's tricky. It's tricky because we all have blind spots. Sometimes we can't see ourselves clearly and our situations clearly. That's why we're in the patterns that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and which is why it is helpful to, when you're at the beginning of the journey, to obviously find the right mentors who can kind of reflect things back to you, um, but also find the tools. Like I on my journey, I found theta healing, which is a beautiful modality that it can help you to do work on yourself. You don't have to necessarily go to another person if you're finding yourself triggered by something. You can you can sit quietly and really reflect upon it and work on yourself too, and
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily wait. So that's the beauty of it, is that where we're constantly evolving. And I do find that with every layer that we uncover, there's a new
Another
one
layer.
that
Yeah.
that arises too. So it's I don't think we ever arrive. Some people are like, yeah, that you get to it, maybe when you arrive, like you end up ascending. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the knowing that there's a constant journey of getting to know ourselves more deeply, what we're here to learn, what our shadows are, and like you said, there are not just our genetic line, but our past lifeline too. So there's multiple generations and mass consciousness too that we have to think about as well, and how that affects us. So there's a lot that we have to heal. There's a lot that we have to move through in order to really do our work, in order to do our mission driven work. So that's why sometimes on the outside, the financial abundance takes time. It takes time to excavate, um, and uh, it's part of the journey. But I also encourage people to look around and see like how blessed you are nonetheless. Like I always find that I've been provided for, even if I don't necessarily at the beginning stages saw, the monetary part come in for my business. I was still gifted amazing opportunities and ways of experiencing life that didn't necessarily come through the container of my business. And so we've got to
Mm-hmm.
stop thinking of it from a one-dimensional standpoint, and start, receiving um, abundance in different ways as well. I think that's the mind shift that you've got to go through too. Is like, how can you allow yourself to be supported by other people as you're doing your work? How can you find other forms of revenue that may not have to do with your work? How can you, yeah, be creative in the ways that you can find the finances that you need to give you, and most importantly, to give yourself time. Because when we feel like we're in a rush to get put out our work, like that never goes, it's like a half baked uh, pie, right? So that's never going to work out in your favor. Everything takes time, and something that is your divine work is going to take time. And so it's a really, really an exercise in patience, and trust, and faith in the whole process, and that you are provided for and safe all along the time.
Right. I think you're touching on something that, especially when it comes to patience and money, because typically when you feel like you need money, you need it now. It's like you don't. Yeah, you recognize that your business may take time to take off or be supportive, but in the meantime, you're in the money construct and you've got
Mhm.
bills to pay, and so it's very
Yeah.
it's the systems that we've created that doesn't really allow
Yeah.
us to
It's
have the time and have a peace about us. Like so
yeah.
one thing that you talked about was success, and I think we have to redefine what that means, each of us, what it means to be successful. And then you talked about
Mhm.
money and being how many other ways that you're blessed. And the way that I term that is the continuum of wealth, that it's more than just dollars and
Mhm.
cents. It's about your connections. It's about your ideas, your opportunities, your relationships, partnerships. It's about the autonomy over the resource that is your time. It is being in a place of trust. And I think this comes to me from,
Mhm.
it's like a little bit of a twist, a spiritual twist on a quote by Albert Einstein, who asks us, do we believe the universe to be a friendly one? And the way that I think about that is when you
Mhm.
embark upon a journey that you have embarked on, that I've embarked on, that many are embarking upon, we have to ask ourselves this question. Do you believe that you are, in fact, the embodiment of a benevolent universe, one that only wants to serve you? And I've asked myself this time and time again. I have to come back to it because I come in and out of trust. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, everything's going to work out. Yeah, yeah, and I believe it.
Yeah.
And then other times I look at the rent coming due and I start losing my shit because it's not there. Like the physicalness, there's a
I know.
physicality. We've created a world that cost. And then I feel you talked about times of being connected more or so with source and being in it and out of it. I tell you, the triggers around finances are a sure way to kick me out. And I do a lot of work around this. I mean, much of my work is to break cycles of generational poverty because I believe it's more, again, it's more than just dollars and cents. It's a belief system. And many times when we are
Mhm. Yes.
needing things, resources, whatever form it may take, we are in an energy of deprivation, like of desperation, of lack and scarcity.
Mm.
And I believe when we manifest, if you will, from those frequencies, we
Mhm.
get more things that are lacking, more things that are desperate. And we haven't made that
Yeah.
connection of how
Yeah.
do you feel differently when your circumstances look desperate. And so it's a lot of
Yeah.
entanglements. Like it's a lot of, as you talked about, introspection of coming into yourself, of trusting the process and the journey. But it's not an easy one. But I will say, I believe it is a worthy journey, a worthy journey.
Mm.
Now, Michelle, we've come to the hour, and I
Abs
have yet to learn, or our audience has yet to learn about your programs and your business. Before we end the podcast, can you just share with us what you are doing in the material world, in the financial world, to help entrepreneurs become self-actualized and to thrive?
Yes, thank you. So I've developed a process that's taking me some iterations, but I'm really happy that it's come to a completion where I've basically utilized all the different tools that I myself have utilized and come across to really come to a place of alignment within myself and in my business as well and in my purpose. Because I do find that when people go on their purposeful path, there's still some missing pieces to it because they still have a specific perception of who they are, what role they have. And oftentimes, we find that there are some hidden dormant talents that people actually have that need to be excavated. And so I help people to excavate that and to really help them get super, super clear on who they're here to serve, what their message is, utilizing the tools, but also using, subconscious work and intuitive work as well. And then, craft that business design that's really going to help them bring in that profit along with the purpose. And it is something, and it's, going to the statement of ikigai, which is the Japanese concept of, you want to have your passion, purpose, your the profit piece, but also is the market ready for what you have to share as well? Sometimes you're ahead of your time,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to realize, maybe the market today is only a few people, and the market in 5 years might be more um, accepting of your concept. So you gotta navigate through all of that too. Um, and so we examine all of those things to really come up with a mission statement that is, a higher version of themselves, and often in a role that they may not have even thought of themselves in before until we excavated these pieces of them. So I've created that process, and now I'm also in another pivotal place of wanting to share this process with other life coaches and business coaches who have a similar mission, to enable them to use this kind of methodology with their clients as well, so that hopefully, more people can really get into this path of alignment. And in addition, I have started a community that I'm super excited about. It's called the Co-Creators. That's the free community, and that's going to be part of a bigger brand called the Multidimensional Leaders. And this is really where, once you've come into your alignment as a leader and you know what you're here to do, then the next part is, how do I find my soul tribe to collaborate with? And I really think that that is the next phase of marketing. The more elevated phase of marketing is about collaborating with others that have similar missions, that you might be doing slightly different roles. But together as a collective, we're going to help each other become visible and give each other opportunities and refer each other. And so to me, that is, where I see this all going. So I'm super excited for that.
Well, I love what you're doing. Can you share with our audience the best way to learn more about your programs and how to reach you?
Yes, you can reach me at michelleparad.com. And I've got lots of different free resources on there, including an archetype quiz that can really help you, hopefully give you some insights into what kind of role you might want to have within your business. And then you can also find my community right on there as well. And I'm oftentimes on Instagram too. You can find me at Michele Parad on there too.
Michele, I want to thank you so much for this interview and your insights today. I believe it will be as illuminating to our audience as it has been for me. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank you for taking this inner journey with us today. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious. If you love this episode and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. This helps listeners just like you find intriguing and transformative content. I also want to know what inspired you and what conscious topics you would like to hear more about. And if you want, you can share those thoughts and questions with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.